Hungry Trilobyte podcast would like to start by acknowledging these fine conventions. SoonerCon, Oklahoma's longest-running pop culture convention, is ready to return in 2023. SoonerCon 31 will be held in Norman, Oklahoma on June 30th through July 2nd, 2023. Gaming, cosplay, autographs, and an art auction await. Visit SoonerCon.com for more details. The Hellmouth Convention, where fandoms bleed together. Evoking the center of the mystical convergence, our event includes fandoms and travelers from all over the world. Like the Hellmouth itself, things gravitate toward it that you might not find elsewhere. The celebration is scheduled for June 9th through 11th, 2023 in Los Angeles, California. Go to thehellmouth.org to plan your visit.
Back again, we have John Billingsley. How you doing this evening?
Peachy keen.
I am so glad to talk to you here because we have a really cool project going on here. For somebody who might not be aware, last year, Trek Talks created a telethon to benefit the organization you work with, the Hollywood Food Coalition. And you and I talked about that last time. And it was a banger of an event. I mean, it was packed with all sorts of talent and these really cool events. And you're doing it again, I hear.
We are doing it again. Yes, we raised $80,000 for the Hollywood Food Coalition, which is the organization I've been working with for the past 6 years, which helps provide a ton of different services, primarily centered around food, to people in need throughout LA County. We work with about 130 not-for-profits to help buttress and augment their needs, as well as serving a hot multi-course meal to all comers 7 nights a week. And yes, we had a very successful multi-hour telethon last year with about 50 guests. We're doing the same again this year. We're doing it a little bit differently in that there'll be fewer guests, but we'll have deeper dives with each person. And we've got some real A-listers that have asked to not have their names released until we get closer to the event. But Brent Spiner is going to be there, and Jonathan Frakes, and a visitor, Terry Farrell. We'll have 4 or 5 panels centering on issues that have relevance to Star Trek fans, such as behind the scenes, the women of Star Trek, a tribute to Nichelle with the Sci-Fi Sisters. Going to be very exciting with some wonderful musical interludes, and Bonnie Gordon is going to help me co-host.
I will be looking forward to a lot of it, but the Bonnie Gordon element is one I'm specifically looking forward to. I
adore her.
Absolutely. Her presence on social media is great. And obviously the voice is fantastic.
Yeah, she's such an incredibly talented and warm and loving person. I haven't known her for very long. We met at a convention in Baltimore, I think. We had adjoining tables, and I just came to adore her immediately. She's such a marvelous, warm, open presence. So she very graciously leaned in to help with this event and to support the Food Coalition. So I thought, well, hey, you should be with me.
For sure.
Yeah.
I trust your judgment there. And you already answered the first question I had in mind when I heard that not only were you doing the telethon again, but you were doing it better. I'm like, how could you top last year? And
better. I mean, a different orientation. And the hope is that we'll keep doing this every year. And I really, as much as I'm interested in having this event raise funds and awareness for the Hollywood Food Coalition, what also really appeals to me is just the nature of Trektivism, what we call Trektivism itself, which is the idea that what Trek represents, the values it represents, are so much about coming together, community building, figuring out ways to be better neighbors and better friends, and helping the world. So a lot of what we do every year, and what I want to continue encouraging, is for folks who are our guests to talk a bit about the things they're passionate about, the things that they're doing, the things that we could all do to kind of lean in a little bit more into our own communities. So that's going to be, as we keep moving forward, always part of what we're trying to keep in mind is how do we tell that story?
And it's an interesting story because I'm amazed at how often we do the same thing a little bit better or a little bit differently each time. So many conventions have some sort of nonprofit or charity components, and that's not a one-off. It seems to be almost baked into the model now.
I totally think it is. And one of the things that I've certainly learned in my years volunteering is that almost everybody you meet does do something. I mean, most human beings have a deeply compassionate side and are in some ways bent towards giving back. if I have a pitch, it's merely that to me, the nature of what you do is like a dial. And I think it's possible for some to maybe just dial it up a notch. Even a small gradation in terms of how much of your time or energy or passion or money you might give could make a substantial difference in your community. And for some who haven't found yet what that volunteeristic bliss is, that's the other thing that I think is exciting. You know, it's sort of like some enchanted evening when you figure out what it is that you might be doing that will make you feel good about yourself and help the world. It's a wonderful feeling. It really can change your life.
It can be, and it happens at these, events and these organizations where you're putting people together ostensibly for the purpose of having a good time, and those are always really fun weekends. But when you get a bunch of people together to start brainstorming on, gee, well, we could pool our resources into this one cause while we're here, and it's only cost maybe an extra $5 above what we were already spending, and you multiply that by 200, suddenly you got something going.
Yeah, and everybody lives somewhere, and in their community, be it a town or a city or a village or a hamlet, there's a bunch of stuff going on that is fundamentally virtuous. And I do sometimes think that we're just a little bit of a Google search away from finding an organization that we could belong to that could change our lives. I mean, I always joke, I went in one day to make a fruit salad, and then I became the board president. So as I've often said, anything can happen in America. I've stepped down from that role, and I'm now the chair of the development committee. But I really think that so much of what happens as you get more invested in a particular organization, as you get to work with the folks, and you have more and more of a sense of ownership and a sense of, I care so much about the mission, I want to be a voice at the table, you can find that you've actually become somebody quite critical to an organization in a way. And I think that's something that could be very meaningful for people who are looking for more substantive things to do in their community.
Mm-hmm. And people will often approach these possible positions of volunteership, and they'll be like, well, I don't know what I could do, and I don't know what role I could have. And that's understandable because they haven't done it. But these organizations are very good at making smart decisions as to who to put in what position, because they're so understaffed, they need the help, and they will put it where they need it.
Absolutely. And so much of I mean, I found when I started working for the Food Coalition that one of the first jobs that I wanted to take on with some other folks was to get everybody together who had been volunteering or who liked the organization but didn't necessarily have a sense of what its long-term vision was. Get everybody together in a room and say, let's just do a day-long brainstorming exercise about what we see down the road for this organization. How would we like to see it grow over the next 3 months, 6 months, year, 5 years? What would be your dream of where we are 20 years from now? It doesn't take a PhD to be able to say, I have a thought. And all those thoughts and all those ideas and all those notions kind of coming together help an organization figure out, oh, this is our strategic plan. And it's really rooted in all these people who've come together to help devise it and build it, and who probably, like as not, once it's embraced, will stick around to help execute it.
And all it takes are two people to say they have the same problem to realize it's not that obvious. If we had a solution, it would benefit us, it would benefit more people. People are always under the impression that their problem, they're the only ones with that problem, and that's almost never the case.
Yeah, I mean, this is always a thing for me. It's like, I don't think you have to reinvent the wheel. I think probably almost anything that you might think about that is of interest to you, be it ecological degradation or social justice or environmental, for me, it was hunger and poverty, but there's so many things, so many issues, it could just be something as simple as your school system and joining the PTA or tutoring a kid or becoming a big brother. I mean, the range in terms of actions that are possible, it's from the more minute to the vast. But I do sometimes think there's more going on in your community than you're aware of. That is really great if you just kind of start digging.
There's so many organizations, groups, and opportunities is the word I'm looking for just find a way to make a little bit of good here and there.
Yeah. And something that I personally think is just in and of itself is not a huge thing, but for folks which I totally get, believe me, people have very busy and demanding lives, and I, absolutely understand the nature of you don't understand everything. But something that the missus and I used to do, which was very satisfying, is we just took a day, and we put an email blast out to all of our pals and said, we're going to do a food drive, and if you want to put a couple of bags of food out on the porch, we'll pick it up. And we just made a schedule for ourselves, and we went and, you know, got cars full of food and dropped them off at the local food bank. You could do the same with clothing, with toys, with books. And if you ask your friends to ask their friends, you can expand that network through a form of healthy metastasis. And you can give yourself a monthly action that doesn't require you to join anything or pay any dues or make any commitments, but that ties you into something that feels regular, consistent, and virtuous.
And that's very similar to what's going on with this telethon here. It started off being a concept by the Trek Geeks podcast network, who themselves were just a couple of people who had these separate shows, and they pooled their resources to kind of boost their own production values. And from there, they said, well, we boosted our production values. Can we boost our efforts in returning to the community?
Well, it's funny because I was on an interview with Bill and Dan, and they said that they had Jonathan Frakes on, and he did a spot with them to raise money for Feeding America. I said, well, what if we did something bigger and we actually had more guests? And they said, oh, what would that look like? And so that's where the concept came from. But they were so eager and enthusiastic to pitch in. We added John Champion from Roddenberry to the mix. We added the wonderful Jay Stobie to the mix. We added the wonderful Earl Green, who is our tech director, to the mix. We have Bonnie Gordon now, Amy Boitano, who's a Uber fan and has been both generous with her time and her money. It's really the Sci-Fi Sisters are on board. So we now have a team of 10 folks to produce this event, plus the people who are on the staff of the Hollywood Food Coalition. And my hope as we continue to grow is to actually build and formalize a relationship with CBS.
And by the time this airs, that's only going to be a few days away, and we're going to have the option of streaming this to the whole world, raising money, raising awareness. And what we're describing isn't functionally that different than sending out an email blast saying, I'm going to round up some food off your porch if you're up for it.
Exactly. No,
it's a couple extra Zoom meetings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, for the fans who, if for anybody who might be listening to this, who's thinking, oh, this is also, you know, it's also just fun. I mean, it's like if you've never gone to a convention, and, you know, conventions, and by the time you pay the airfare and the hotel and the yada, yada, they're, you know, this is sort of the opportunity to kind of come to an 8-hour convention, meet and get to experience the wonderfulness of a lot of great people. You can still be in your pajamas, and the price of admission is, you know, please, a donation to the Hollywood Food Coalition. Mm-hmm. So I do think it's also, because I never want to short sheet the pure entertainment value for the fans. It makes perfect sense that their willingness to tune in is predicated on the idea that they're going to enjoy the day. And we had a blast last year and got, I think, great response. I have every confidence that this will be equally fun this year.
That's a great point. When I started this show, part of it was because I wanted to grab the experience of going to a con and having that interaction with somebody whose work you admire, and or meeting a new friend. And that's something a lot of people don't get, because a lot of people tell me, I don't go to conventions. There's not one near me. I don't think I have the money. And this is a great substitute. And in fact, it's better in some ways, because like you said, you can still be in your pajamas. You can, Yeah.
And you know, obviously the one thing we can't replicate is the delight of like-minded fans gathering together. But as I've said to people, there's nothing to stop you from getting together with some friends in your community and watching it together in your living room, or maybe getting your fans on a you know, your peeps together electronically and watching en masse. There are ways to kind of continue to spread the nature of what it means to be a community and join another community. And I do think of it as one community. That's what I love about Star Trek, and what has grown more and more meaningful to me as the years have passed, is that the reason this franchise is so special and interesting is that there has been a community that has formed that allows those of us who are in front of the camera, those of us who are behind the camera, those of us who've been involved in the making of Star Trek, to become very close and intricately connected to a raft of supporters of the franchise, fans and friends of the franchise. I really think of it as community building.
It is, and people are enthusiastic about that. It's not like you're getting hounded for a donation outside of Walmart. No, you enjoy the conversations, you enjoy the way of applying your fandom to doing something good for somebody else. And if somebody wants to get in, like get together electronically. If you don't have somebody in your neighborhood, get a
Yeah.
Discord server
Yeah.
or a Facebook chat room.
We will have as well on the Trektivism panel a couple of people representing folks who, from a fan perspective or from a community perspective, have started their own wonderful enterprises in their efforts. So I mean, I do think there's also the gentleman who's going to be appearing this year, Matthew Simone. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, has done some wonderful work generating revenue and support for a terrific group called Esther's, I think it's called Esther's Echo, which is based in, I should probably just make sure I've got that right, but I'm almost positive that's it, based in Africa. And it's a female-driven network of people who are working in the social health and medical health business. And a little bit of money goes a long way there. So he's done an amazing job at helping to, transform the community. He lives in Canada, just it touched him and
Wow.
made it his life. It's so lovely to see that.
After the event, obviously I can't do it right now, but after the event, I will go through and I will document who's involved in what panel and what organization they represent, and really anything that we can do to network this together, because it might not be a cause that I can, I'm personally going to get involved in, but there may be a listener who wants to do that or wants more information. Exactly. I will get that to them.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's, and as we keep doing this down the years and we become more sophisticated and we learn more, I'm sure that we'll get better and better ourselves at figuring out how to, excuse me, I have a little bit of a head cold today, at how to do an even better job at getting the word out before and after. That's something that we're still learning right now. We're really, depending on the kindness of strangers, above and beyond what Roddenberry does, what John does with Roddenberry, and above and beyond what Trek Geeks does. It's right now a network of about 80 or 90 folks who have been, offered very graciously to spread the word for us through social media, through their podcasts, through their writings. I do think that the nature of Star Trek, there's such a huge array of folks who are in conversations with one another that we're still learning about how to megaphone it out to more people.
And that partially comes down to the challenge of social media we have right now, where we can see how it can do so much good in such a short amount of time, and yet one slight miscommunication can make things go completely sideways, and that turns everybody off. And I don't necessarily think that fear is justified.
It's hard. I mean, yeah, it's especially tricky if you have, I mean, I'll be honest with you. So part of me, I work for a not-for-profit, and I'm very passionate about that work. Part of me also just wants to engage with fans and pals one-on-one. And I don't want to feel like every exchange I have to be so tamped down and neutral to make sure I don't offend anybody. And I'm sure that that's probably true for many, many people who are engaging in social media. And I never want to, I'm a lefty, so I don't like the idea that these words cancel culture and politically correct have been mechanisms by which I think the extreme right has found a way to say anything goes, no matter how noxious. But I do feel like there needs to be some understanding that people can have a sense of humor in the way they engage in social media without it becoming too, I certainly have that challenge.
And I will say, from the fan perspective, because having gone to a bunch of cons and met a whole bunch of people and sent out a lot of unsolicited emails, I'll be very honest with you, I really never want to be the person who is like taking it too far, who is crossing that boundary. I don't want to be the person you're afraid I'm waiting behind your car with a pizza full of rupees.
And I never feel that. I mean, I certainly, and again, not to minimize what obviously as an old fat balding four-eyed character guy, I probably don't have the same issues or concerns that an ingenue does. So
Mhm.
I get the legitimate fears that people who are celebrities or known entities can have. For me, it has been an unadorned joy in my life to get to know a lot of people. That's one of the reasons I love what I do, is I get to meet a lot of people, and I've
Mhm.
I could count the honestly, I could count. I don't know that I could come up with a single instance where I felt like, oh Jesus, I'm scared. There are people who have their issues, and you have to be very delicate and gentle. And there are people who've, I think, unfortunately, kind of developed more of a sense of closeness to what they think I am than would probably be healthy for them. But that's different.
Mhm.
Mostly what I get concerned about is in my own interactions is finding that line between being who I am, which is a smart ass,
Mhm.
and recognizing that I'm also trying to be a bit of a public personality attached to a cause. And in a very small way. I mean, this is not, I ain't Brad Pitt. So it's not about, we are $2.5 million a year organization. Nonetheless, it becomes more of a question for me as so consequently I've kind of pulled back on my own personal use of social media, which I
Mhm.
miss sometimes, but it's the nature of the beast.
And that's also been something that's really been a concern to me, is that you're not the only celebrity I've seen do that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's hard, and I mean there are, look, obviously on the one end of the spectrum, there's the Kanye, where it's just like, oh my God, people who blow themselves up because they do not understand what is either civil, polite, or legitimate discourse. Then there's the other end of it where I do feel like every now and again, it's like, in an unguarded moment, somebody says something that could be misconstrued and it becomes like this issue. And eek, that's, I think, what a lot of people who are kind of a little more tentative now about using social
Right.
media fear, which I understand. It's a very tricky thing because I also, and I know this is not necessarily, this interests me because I find myself pulled between Scylla and Charybdis when I think about what it means to speak to the world and how you want to kind of do two things simultaneously. You want to be your best, most authentic self, and you want to speak honestly, and you also want to have a deep and legitimate understanding of where a lot of sensitivities lie in this world because of the realities that a lot of people have been sucking on the fuzzy end of a lollipop for a long time and they're sick of it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Hard.
It is. And a lot of it comes down to, like you said, you want to always be your best self in the world. But I use the internet as a way of researching and finding out new information. And that, by definition, information I don't have. Understanding of things is evolving. And I might either not know something, or I might say what I do know very poorly. And I don't think I should be destroyed for that. And I've never been, so I'm not
Yeah.
complaining personally.
I, I haven't. There was a little imbroglio on Twitter with me that I won't go into here, but that was kind of like, served as a bit of a cautionary tale for me. It wasn't really anything I said, but it was nonetheless sort of an unfortunate instance where, because you develop relationships with people on social media, you're tied to their voice. And sometimes, I mean, which is weird. It's like somebody who's a partisan of yours, or somebody that is um behaving in a way that you might not have anything to do with, but who people associate with you. It's very, I have pulled back from social media quite a bit. Not that I ever was like deep into it, but I certainly did enjoy the one-on-one engagement with fans, and I definitely appreciated the fact that it was a vehicle by which I could kind of talk about the Hollywood Food Coalition. And I'm trying to find my way now in this world to figure out, like, it's not always easy.
You definitely, some of your better tweets were always, it's like you were channeling Roger Dangerfield. You were a king smartass in those. And that was one of the reasons I not only followed you, but hit notify, because like I just wanted to see every time you put a zinger somewhere in the world.
Yeah, and it's funny because one man's zinger is another man's I made we made a little video, just the very first little video we made, just kind of promote this year's event. And a wonderful gal had a little party for us in Vegas, and we had a big crowd of people. And I just said, okay, everybody, let's get together, and we're all going to shout at the same time, Trek Talks 2, motherfucker. It's like, ah! And it was,
it's fun. It's harmless. It's funny.
Yeah, but it's like, this language is not acceptable. I've been watching Star Trek my whole life with my children. It's like,
that drives me crazy. I will not. Okay. On the cruise earlier this year, I hold nothing against this person, but I was in line and I overheard somebody saying to somebody else, can you believe so and so used the F word? I'm like, well,
probably me.
It's like, I used it 3 times before breakfast, so I'm not exactly sure why you're so upset that this person you've seen on TV said it when everybody else in this room has too. Why is that line drawn?
I know, but that's exactly it. It's the problem is that I, as an individual, I work blue, and I'm a smart ass. And however, I'm also, and again, I'm very cognizant of the fact I'm not a major celebrity, so it's not as if I am the spokesperson for. But to the extent that I am kind of, through Trek Talks, wanting to speak publicly about an organization that I support, I have to be more cognizant of the dissonance between one conversation that kind of has to be the conversation that a not-for-profit would have, and another conversation, which is a conversation that John Billingsley is going to have. And it's as somebody who always thought he was a vaguely recognizable character actor, primarily known for playing space aliens and child molesters, I never really thought I was going to have to kind of like worry too much about that.
But to swing back, this is an excellent opportunity to kind of balance the line, because when you have a telethon like we're looking at here, you have a clear delineation between, this is the time we're using to, Jerry Lewis is going to come on and tell us sob stories and talk about the importance of your donations. And here's going to be the song and dance routine.
Yeah. And I also want everybody to feel, I'm not saying anything to anybody, nor would I ever about, be careful in the conversation of a dialogue. If people want to come on and have a rambunctious 20-minute conversation, huzzah, just as is true at the conventions. So yes, there has to be a built-in understanding between, there is a mission that an organization has, and the mission is important, and it's valuable, and it should be spoken to. And then there is the nature of the entertainment that circles around the mission that can be utilized to help raise awareness, and don't try and put your aesthetic narrowness too much in the way of the event. But then I'm, as my wife has often said, you could never have run for office. 1, you're an atheist, and 2, you can't get 3 words out of your mouth without using the word fuck. It's like, well. Yeah, not to mention my checkered past.
Well, hey.
Not to mention the fact that I also make a lot of jokes about playing child molesters on television, which, what? But the world generally, I think, is confused by.
You can make that joke because you're the one that played them. You're the only person who can say that.
I know, and my joke is usually something to the effect of, I don't even like children, much less am I eroticized by them.
Well, my favorite one was where you said something to the effect of that, people talked about you being typecast as the weird middle-aged intellectual guy, and you said, well, it's a step up.
It's true. Now I've aged out of child molestation. Now I'm too like, ew, I wouldn't want him molesting my child. No. Like,
so I won't ask you to, get into the specifics of what who's going to do what, and because you already said you can't give the names, and I'm fair with that.
There are a couple of people who said they want to be announced closer to the day, which I can appreciate. But as I said, we've got Brent Spiner, we've got Jonathan Frakes, we've got Terry Farrell, Nana Visitor, John Delancey. Actually, let me just pull my list out here. Let's see, who am I forgetting? Armin Shimmerman, Bob Picardo, Rod Roddenberry, and Heidi. Brandon Braga is coming. We are still working on a few people, so I probably shouldn't. I think Sirach is joining us. Gates, I believe, is joining us. We are hoping that we can get a couple of folks from the current shows. The Hageman brothers, I believe, are joining us. And then there are a few folks that we're kind of waiting on still. Additionally, we'll have Dan Curry and some folks who will be on a panel about the design of Star Trek, the making of Star Trek. We'll have some folks, again, as I mentioned, on the panel about Trektivism, who come at the work from perspectives that are not necessarily tied to Star Trek, but they're wonderful people who do great work. It's going to be an amazing show.
That is really what I was getting at there. I was going to ask if you talked about the panels on diversity and on creation of the show, and if you were going to recommend specific events for somebody who's wanted to just get a glimpse of what a real in-person convention is like, what should they look for on that list?
Well, so this is one way to look at it. Every 2-hour block will be designed to, one, tell a little bit of a story of the Hollywood Food Coalition, two, have some interstitial entertainment. So Bonnie Gordon, the Roddenberrys will have some pre-recorded musical interludes. And then there will be two 20 to 30 minute long interviews with some of the people I mentioned, and one 45-minute panel. So in a 2-hour block, you'll get a panel, a couple of chats, and some fun. And we don't know yet which 2-hour block will feature which guests. This is the period of time when it's always the trickiest based on last year, when you actually have to start saying, do you have a preference as to whether you're early or late? And people are always, no. Yeah. Yeah, I need to be. So we will jigger. So some people who we thought might be, for instance, standalone guests, we'd have an entire segment just devoted to them. We may end up shifting or morphing people into pairs. We may pre-record some things. Brent may be out of town in January, so we may pre-record. We did a great pre-recorded segment with Will Wheaton the other day. So we just started this week designing the actual 8-hour programming blocks in more detail.
Gotcha.
The panels, as I mentioned, one is going to be about Trektivism, one is going to be about the behind the scenes, the making of Star Trek, what it's like to actually, how does the show look like the show? And we'll have effects folks, we'll have design folks, the Akutas, I believe, will be there, Denise and Mike. The Sci-Fi Sisters are going to do, I think, something really fun, and we're kind of waiting to see who we might be able to get as guests. This is where I can't quite give names because they don't have the yeses yet, but the hope is that their panel will be both a tribute to Nichelle and the significance of Nichelle's work, but also because we are performing this on or holding this event on Martin Luther King weekend. We kind of want to talk about the legacy of Star Trek specifically. And the Sci-Fi Sisters, their story itself, I think, is remarkable for African-American women who formed this marvelous team of podcasters and storytellers. And we kind of want to hear their story, what attracted them to the franchise, what it is that brought them together. But as was the case last year, whatever you think is in stone one week, you find out is in sand the next. So it will doubtless shift, morph, and change. We're going to make the first announcement of the first, 60% of the guests who said yay next week. And then we'll announce individual guests as we move closer, as we get permission, and as we get, hopefully, the last few yeses we need.
Sure.
Last year, what we did was we did more, almost every panel, with a few exceptions, was a panel with multiple people. And while we got great, I think, reaction, generally speaking, I think what a lot of people said was, boy, I felt like there were too many people for the conference for everybody to get a chance to. I mean, we had a kind of a great, ironically, what happened last year, we'd never done this before. And I said, well, let me just invite a bunch of people. We're probably going to get a bunch of no's. Everybody said yes. It was like, oh, all right, well, I guess we're going to have 7 people on this panel. I'm not going to turn anybody down. So this year we kind of decided, let's have more in-depth one-on-one conversations, and let's do the asks in a more gradated way. So we've got, I think, maybe 80% of our asks are out, 60% of the folks have said yes, and now we're going to kind of fill it out.
Well, John, I will leave it there because I think that's a great pitch for somebody wanting to attend the event. Where can they check out the event, and where can they follow your adventures online?
So I am J Billingsley 60 on Twitter. I don't do Facebook. I don't do Instagram. So I'm never great with the camera and the pictures. But follow me on Twitter. But more importantly, trektalks.net is the place to go to find out how to watch the show. You can find out about the Hollywood Food Coalition. It'll link you to last year's show. So you can watch last year's show and see what you think. And you also, if you are interested, you can make a donation in advance of the show, because there's a wonderful Give Butter link that will allow you to make a pre-pledge. Then we can say right out of the gate, we've already raised.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, all that is going to be in the show notes on my website, aaronbossig.com. If you're reading this right off the feed as it's fresh, you probably have a couple of days to prep, clear that schedule. So go ahead and do that. John, thanks so much for being here.
Yes, and I should also 10 to 6, 10 Pacific time to 6 Pacific time. I'll let you do the math depending on where you live, you who are in Yugoslavia. Great.
I'll see you there.